Why wasn't Israel to be afraid of the people of Canaan? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 7. We're going to be reading from verses 17 to 26. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy chapter 7, beginning verse 17. If you should say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt, the great trials which your eyes saw, the signs and the wonders, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm, by which the Lord your God brought you out. So shall the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among them until those who are left, who hide themselves from you, are destroyed. You shall not be terrified of them, for the Lord your God, the great and awesome God, is among you. And the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you little by little. You will be unable to destroy them at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But the Lord your God will deliver them over to you, and will inflict defeat upon them until they are destroyed. And he will deliver their kings into your hand, and you will destroy their name from under heaven. No one shall be able to stand against you until you have destroyed them. You shall burn the carved images of their gods with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourselves, lest you be snared by it, for it is an abomination to the Lord your God. Nor shall you bring an abomination into your house, lest you be doomed to destruction like it. You shall utterly detest it, and utterly abhor it, for it is an accursed thing. In this chapter, Moses is describing to Israel how they were a chosen people, not because of their numbers, but because of God's love for them and love for the faithful Abraham. Because God swore to Abraham that his descendants would own the land of Canaan, he was going to fulfill his promises in them. But there would be further blessings come upon them if they continued obeying God. He would multiply them further than he already had. He would allow their crops to grow in abundance and not allow sickness to come upon them, among other things that he promised here. Hearing this should have been motivation enough for Israel to continue serving God. But of course, there was an opportunity for the devil to tempt them with fear of the people of the land, just as he did to the generation before. The people of the land of Canaan were greater than Israel. Why? Let's remember that these nations had been around longer and had more established cultures and had men of war. Israel had grown into a larger people during slavery in Egypt. Although they had God, they really didn't have a national identity yet. Their men of war had not been men of war long. And at the very least, the people in all the land of Canaan were at least equal in number to Israel and had giants fighting for them, meaning that without God, Israel would likely lose in their conquest attempt. Moses told Israel, though, that they weren't to fear. In order to combat this fear, they needed to remember what God had already done for them. He led them out of Egypt with a mighty hand when Pharaoh's army should have been able to keep Israel enslaved. He provided them manna from heaven and water from rocks when they needed it. He kept them from the hands of the Amalekites and defeated Sihon and Og, formidable kings and peoples on the east side of the Jordan. Since God had done these things already, Israel was to trust in God's promises to them as they traveled west across the Jordan. Moreover, God said that he would send the hornet among them, the people of the land, until those who were left were destroyed. It's not that God needed the hornet to accomplish his will, but he was going to use the hornet to accomplish his will. Joshua 24:12 would say that God had in fact fulfilled this promise to Israel. Now some come along and say that this could be taken figuratively to represent any kind of plague that God used. And while this could be so, since Joshua mentioned this thing as happening, I don't find any reason to doubt that Moses was speaking literally. What Israel needed to know was they weren't going to drive the Canaanites from the land by their own strength, but by the power of God, who would work in his own way. But even though God would destroy the people of the land, he would not do so all at once, lest the beasts of the field become too numerous for them. This reference has caused some Bible scholars to conclude that Israel wasn't as large as numbers makes them out to be, for otherwise, how would the beasts of the field take over if the Canaanites were simply being taken over by a large number of people? But we need to think here. If God simply smote the Canaanites in one blow, which was within his power to do, Israel would have needed time to travel and populate the land of Canaan. During that time, the animals could have begun to take over, and once wild animals do so, it's quite the effort to get them to stop. Therefore, what Moses is saying here is that God would drive these peoples out, but he would not do so all at once, but as Israel advanced. In Joshua, we're going to find that the conquest took a few years to accomplish, even though it might only take us a short time to read the entire account in the book of Joshua. When God delivered these people into their hands, it is again reiterated that they are to burn down the land's altars and gods and not take those idols into their houses as souvenirs. That is an abomination to God, and if they did so, they would be doomed to destruction, just like the Canaanites were. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 1 to 10, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.